Hi there. Hello, welcome everybody. Thanks for joining us today. My name is Mitch Ashley, and we're bringing a very special program to you today. We're talking about Platformr and AWS, talking about streamlining DevOps and using automation and some best practices and capabilities. But we're doing this in a roundtable format, so I think you'll enjoy the discussion. We're sharing a lot of experiences, information, etc., and we'll get into that in just a moment. Let me take care of a few housekeeping details. Most important, I want to mention that today's webinar and roundtable is put on by Platformr and AWS, our two sponsors that are with us today. And this is a dialogue that we're going to be having, but we would like you to have it with us. So we'd love to have you jump in on chat. Let us know where you're joining from today, where in the world you are. But even more than that, we'd love to hear your comments, reactions, thoughts. I agree with that. I like that idea. We had this happen here. I have a question. And we'll address those as we go as part of our conversation. Matter of fact, the more you participate, oftentimes that guides our discussion, particularly in areas where you'd like to go. So feel free to jump in there. We also are recording today's roundtable, and we will provide a link to that for an on-demand rewatch, or you can share it with others who can also come back and check it out as well. We don't have any slides. This is no death by PowerPoint. It's one of our rules here. But we do have lots of handouts in the handout section of your webinar software. So feel free to avail yourself of that. We may mention some of those when we get going here, but feel free to check those out, download those. Lots of good resources. We may mention some others that we'll put links into the chat. But please chime in there with where you're joining from today. So as I mentioned, we're talking about streamlining DevOps and the role that automation can play. And of course, I'm sure the AI word will come up as part of our conversation. That's tough for it not to these days, but that's not the only part of the solution, of course. A lot of things we already do in addition to what AI can offer to us, but we'll try to combine those things and let you know where that's headed as well. So I think a lot of our discussion is not only, how do we eliminate or reduce the mundane tasks, easy for you to say, the mundane tasks here and there, but also, through the automation, we get repetitive things. We can improve quality, improve speed, things like that. So we're going to get into a lot of great topics. I'm joined by a couple of great gentlemen who I'm proud to be on the panel with today. Let's start out with you, Ryan, if you'd introduce yourself, please.
Sure. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you're coming from today. My name is Ryan Cummingdeer. I am the CEO here at Platformr. A little bit of background about myself. I've been in the tech industry for about 30 years. I started off as a software developer. I still say I'm a software developer, sometimes full-time, sometimes moonlighting. But I've filled the roles of like a DBA, IT admin, sysadmin, solutions architect, project manager, DevOps engineer. But most of my career probably was in the CTO role. I was a CTO for AWS Premier Consulting Company for a number of years, moved into the CTO at a Amazon MSP company, as well as a leader at Amazon on the well-architected team. I've managed everything from small engineering teams to dozens of engineering teams, and DevOps is my passion, and I love focusing on that in the space. So a little bit of overview.
Nice. You and I have a lot in common there, though, which is great. Great to have you here, Dean. Would you introduce yourself, please?
Yeah, thank you. Thanks, Mitch. Ryan set the bar awful high. I'm not sure if I can meet that or not, but I'll give my intro anyway. So everybody, of course, I work for AWS, Amazon. I'm a worldwide AMA partner go-to-market specialist. Basically, what my job role is about working with partners and introducing them to application modernization. That includes the infrastructure side and the application side, and help them be successful in that space. And so I'm excited to work with Platformr and with Ryan and his team to talk about DevOps. Of course, DevOps is integrated into everything that we do. So it's going to be a great conversation today. A little bit more background. I have a GSI background. So I worked for a major global service integration company for about 15, 20 years in the space of data center exits, infrastructure, and all the good stuff that goes along with virtualization and cloud adoption and support.
Excellent. Fantastic. And again, I'm Mitch Ashley. I lead the analyst practice at Futurum Research, focused on DevOps, application development, software security, cloud native infrastructure, anything to do with building application software and pipelines and securing those. So this is a great conversation. Done a lot of work with AWS in the past, and great to be working with Platformr here as well. So thanks, Jim. I guess I really didn't tell the truth. There was one slide. That's the one I have, the intro slide, but I'll take that down. There we go. Slide free from this point forward. It's interesting when we say DevOps today, we don't mean this quite the same thing we meant maybe 10 years ago. I mean, my first DevOps implementation, I think, was about 2014 or 15, somewhere around that range. So it's been a while now. It's been around. Not that everybody's been doing that long, but we thought of it a little bit differently. I'm curious, maybe Ryan, your perspective, if you want to give a little bit of history, but kind of focus on what does DevOps mean today when we say that?
Well, yeah, I mean, and DevOps is a culture, right? And so I think DevOps really started when we were focusing on how to improve putting software into a production environment, right? And that includes the whole operations around it. That's the whole education around it. It's really a culture of the people on understanding what good DevOps looks like. And so that's really how I define DevOps. It is that the combination of the people, the processes in place, and the tools that are being used for the automation and for the deployments. So that's where it all started. My experience on where I've seen it is when the industry first started using the word DevOps and started trying to figure out how to solve that and identifying that as a thing, a lot of times they just asked the developer that was on the team, do DevOps. And so they didn't quite get the opportunity, the bigger picture. And so we had a lot of developers going, okay, that just means I need to build out a CI/CD pipeline, right? And deploy out things into a development environment, production environment. Check, I got that done. And then, every year I'd say that kind of scope increases again and again and again, getting a little bit larger, understanding really what that scope looks like on DevOps. And so today, you'll have companies that have titles of DevOps engineers, but you'll also have teams that say we are the DevOps team, even though the people on those teams are individual roles, like a cloud architect or a developer, a security expert, a QA analyst, the product manager, that are defining kind of what those DevOps expectations are and measures of success. So it's definitely evolved a lot, and it's still evolving as more and more tools are coming out. So, that's my perspective and kind of my experience as well. I'd love to hear Dean's thoughts on where his background on DevOps, because I think everybody's got a unique journey on the nebulous, what is DevOps? So, yeah.
Yeah. And Ryan, I'm so happy that you said people, process, and tools, right? And not just said tools, because everybody thinks of DevOps and the first thing to do is they think of the technology, the software stack, right? It's like, what can I go out and buy really quick that's going to make me super successful? And we all know that's not the right approach. That really the right approach is look culturally inside, look at your own operational model, and try to look at it from a viewpoint of how do I make it better? How do I meet those business requirements that I have, where I have to be deploying these applications and refreshing these applications with net new feature sets, so I can continue growing my company and meeting my objectives from my C leaders who are looking at from a business standpoint. As technologists, we love technology, and we always think about go out and buy something and we'll make it even better. Or let's tweak something, and from a technology standpoint, but it's a three-legged stool, and you can't always forget those other legs. And the best companies that we've seen that we work with endorse all three aspects of it, of looking at it from who they have in place, what the skill set is, what their processes they developed internally, and then again, what type of software they use and how they get that action from their business requirements.
Another lens that I put on it too is people ask me, what is DevOps? And I say, well, DevOps isn't a tool. DevOps is about how we create software, which involves, of course, people, process, and technology. There's a set of kind of principles, things like that. There's no manifesto, but there's some recurring ideas around creating repeatable processes and things that are automated, that you can increase the speed and frequency of software that makes it through the pipeline. But it's really more than that. It's also the interconnectedness of how we create software and the roles and the people that are involved in that, and trying to increase the flow of how that happens and reduce bottlenecks and do continuous improvement, things like that. So you're going to elevate the craft, if you will, or the process around building software. And of course, what we do changes all the time. Cloud native got introduced as in the middle of this process, and now AI has become an even greater part of what we do today. There'll be something else, a year or two down the road. But the key part of it is those things can be adapted both to where you are and also whether you're just getting started or you've been doing this a while, or some new technique that comes out down the road.
Absolutely.
All right, great. Well, let's do this. I'd love to kind of jump into maybe what some of the unique challenges are in DevOps today. I mean, my first, and I've gone through 3 transitions of bringing in DevOps. The first one, of course, was like, where do we start? Oh, CI/CD, let's do that. And that was sort of the beginning place, right? Where a lot of organizations may even still start there, but it's a different world today. Ryan, I'm going to make it a really easy bet that you've got an opinion about this. So we'll let you start out again.
Yeah, no, absolutely. This is where I'm overly passionate about, right? And this is one of the reasons why when I joined AWS, I joined them on the well-architected team because I was so passionate about the broader topic of best practices in the development space. But yeah, it is more than CI/CD pipeline. It is more than just the tools to help the developers in their development environments and getting that out. So this is where I really like to kind of focus on the broader topic. If we're talking about AWS and the cloud, there is that concept of a cloud center of excellence, right? And the cloud center of excellence is kind of talking about best practices for the cloud in general, right? And how you do cloud ops. And so I take a lot of those best practices, a lot of those categories, and say, now, how is that impacting the specific development teams and the engineering teams? And like, okay, well, we need to have a team really defining the scope of what success looks like in DevOps, right? And it's different at every company size, right? If you're at a small company, it looks completely different than if you're an enterprise company. And if you're brand new to DevOps, you're crawling before you walk, before you run, and then start setting up more of the success. But it includes the security requirements. How is your development security best practice in place, your publishing process in place, where it's landing in production or staging or disaster recovery, where all that's playing in place? How are you analyzing your code? How are you meeting your recovery point objectives, your backups, your uptime guarantees, your SLAs, and how are you observing that? How are you getting the tools, the monitoring, and the metrics in place to support the SRE team or the reliability team to improve those tools and automations to get in place to do that as well? So I say it includes all these different teams, your reliability, your security team, your financials team, to say, even when it comes down to AWS, am I tagging all of the resources properly so my financial team has a better visibility of costs? And so making sure that all of these little pieces, all these teams have their input on what is success look like when software is in production, and how they can get the reports, how they can get their alerts on detective security alerts or their downtime alerts, things like that. So I usually try to broaden that up. Is my software application meeting my networking requirements? Is it essential networking versus distributed networking? How am I doing that in the security world? So that's where I love making sure that we have a scope defined. And so when I work with like large enterprise companies, I worked with one a few years ago that had a couple dozen different development teams. And the first thing we did was, let's create a DevOps team, kind of a cross-functional team that we can define basically documentation, kind of like the CCOE documentation that says, here is what we think is success looks like when software goes into production, and here are all the requirements of that. And once again, that team was just starting the journey off. So then, the first 3 months, we had to focus on these metrics and do retrospective meetings and figure out how to solve it and work on the automation and set that culture, because every one of those decisions can be impacted by a junior developer, a QA analyst, a QA engineer, everybody involved in the whole team. So sharing that document, sharing that process out that cross-functional team kind of created. And so, yeah, I'm rambling a lot on the broader scope of DevOps and how it impacts the whole company. So that's where I think we are going, is like there's more tools now and bigger scope of this DevOps category. So
I think it might be fair to say that really DevOps today is more about end-to-end software development lifecycle, and applying some of those principles and processes.
Yeah.
And it's matured to a point too that you have to have this type of methodology in place, because organizations now are running at the speed of light, and they're setting themselves up with different SLOs and SLAs within their internal IT business to their external business, the revenue producing operating companies, right, or the different types of departments within the company. So you have to have that holistic view of everything that's going on in the environment. You no longer can say, I'm only going to worry about 3 or 4 different servers in a certain place. You know, it's you have to have that full vision, that peripheral vision of all the systems that are running, and it's got to be set up in a way that you can task that with the least amount of effort to be able to get all that visibility and to be able to report that visibility back to senior management to understand how the business is running.
Yeah, part of that end-to-end too is, one of the ideas behind DevOps is try to break down silos, but you could still try to do DevOps and still, be siloed, or maybe parts of it are. But I guess the point being, if you think about this across the software development lifecycle, it's not just writing code or testing code or getting into production. Yes, it's all those things, but there's a lot of other things: software security, compliance, right? Think about all the kind of data exhaust we get off of those tools and processes that are automated. I know compliance is an area where you focus a lot in too, Ryan.
Yeah, absolutely. And so understanding, usually the security team and the operations team at a company will identify, here are our compliance policies that we must meet. It is up to the engineering team to make sure that whatever they're writing, whatever tools they're using, can start meeting those compliances, and we monitor that along the way. So yeah, 100%, whether that's, PCI or HIPAA or a SOC compliance, any of those type of compliances that come into play.
Yeah. And what's great too, Ryan, is that, as you know, that complexity also comes in. It's not just one environment that people are talking about. Yeah, most enterprises have 3 to 7 to 10 different environments that they're managing across that software lifecycle. And so leveraging some type of technology to make sure all those different types of repos are all in the same place, all these landing zones are all configured the same way. So you can insist that compliancy. So when you do roll it out, you're not breaking something along that release cycle.
Yeah, and this is where I'll throw a little plug in there for AWS. AWS has made it practically, there's not a cost barrier to increasing the number of accounts you have, the number of environments that you have. And so it's easy, especially with infrastructure as code, to actually reinforce the separation of environments and to create more environments quickly. And this is what I love about AWS. It makes security an easier answer. So
definitely, we make that part of the task. Maybe mundane to some, super important to others, right? It just depends on your perspective. We talk about speed of delivery. Sometimes speed isn't the only thing, right? We're also talking about scaling, what you're able to do. It's also responsiveness, right? That's one of the biggest challenges we have is what the business needs today. That could change tomorrow, could change a small or even a big way. And so we have to course correct with minimal collateral damage and be able to make those kinds of adjustments. Or prepare for new reporting requirements, all of those kind of things. So it isn't just one set of challenges of like develop more software faster, maybe more bad software faster. That'd be the worst case. All right. So let's jump into, one other thing I want to mention too, if anybody's ever read the Phoenix Project, one of the forms of a silo is reliance on a person who is the person who knows all those things and knows where all the skeletons are and how to get them out of the closet or keep them in, but solve all those issues. They know how the pipeline works, they know how the tools work, they've automated, and then all of a sudden that person is either overtaxed or leads or something. So it really is about, I'd love to hear your thoughts about how this is a culture of how you not just automate this, but you involve people in that process. You want to jump in, Dean?
Yeah, I think from a cultural standpoint, we actually have a couple activities that we do at AWS that we run with our partners, and one of them is the Experience-Based Accelerator, which is an acronym is the EBA. But basically, that's what we try to do because it's such a hurdle, right? We always talk about moving to cloud or modernizing existing workloads on cloud. And it's not the technology. There's some super stats around 85% of the challenges that we have on onboarding workloads to cloud it comes down to cultural issues of trying to break, like you're saying, breaking down those silos from the folks who run the applications to the folks that run the infrastructure to the networking teams, the security compliancy teams. And then you got your business application owners too, of course, that have a voice and opinion of everything that happens based upon the application. So it's difficult, and that's why we put together really structured programs to get through that cultural side. Because no matter how, as we started the conversation today, right? No matter how good your tool set is, if the team's not together and not working cohesively, then it doesn't matter how good the tool is, it's not going to work right. So we put a lot of emphasis on that, and we really break it down, and we do it based upon the agile methodology. I mean, there's a bunch of different agiles, a bunch of different methodologies out there. SAFe being one of those. But basically get the people in the room and do breakout sessions and record the challenges and do break them down in small work packages or sprints and work items, and have people accountable for what their discipline is, and making sure that there's agreement across those disciplines. Because we all know how big enterprises work, right? The networking guy has probably, or gal has never met the person who actually runs the application, right? Unless there's a problem. And in my 15 years of working in this business, you always blame the network guy anyway. It's always a networking issue. That's my go-to default all the time. So, that's the way we approach it. We approach it as a full team type effort, making sure everybody's on the same page. All the success factors have been outlined. People are all of the single North Star vision. And then we move forward with whatever that methodology is to be used.
I remember saying this several times. Don't be Brent. If you remember from the Phoenix project, that was the constraint person who kind of owned everything, right? You don't want to be Brent. And also, by the way, you could tell who drew any diagram in your specs based on what object is in the middle. If it's a cloud, it was the network. If it was, it was some process, it was a software person. But anyway, total aside.
Yeah.
Well, let's talk about. There's a lot of things we're trying to juggle here. And by the way, I've been studying DevOps as well as doing it for a long time. And, the numbers today in surveys we do are in the 80 to 90% plus of people who are doing DevOps. Not everybody's, at the mastery level for sure, but there are a lot of people who are at that state, kind of feel they've really kind of figured it out. And a lot of people are still scaling it in their organizations, taking it, kind of operationalizing across the organization, standardizing it. But it is a very common practice. So you're probably the exception if you're not doing at least some parts of DevOps in your organization. So whether it's, talking about speed or the skills needed, kind of people and how you help your people go through this process, how do we address the pain points we were talking about earlier, whether it's compliance or it's managing, cloud resources and governance and all of those issues? You want to share some initial thoughts, Ryan?
Sure. Similar to you, I think, Mitch, I've worked with a lot of companies on DevOps and improving their DevOps, identifying their gaps. And it always comes down to the first problem, and that's people or culture. And just as you said, in the Phoenix project, understanding how to scale that one person and making a culture around more than just that one person, around the whole process and the team and everybody involved. And so for me, this also comes down to balancing. And this is actually what I run into a lot in the enterprise companies, is balancing that compliance guardrails with innovation of the engineering teams, right? And so a lot of it is having those DevOps teams defining the policies, saying we have to have this level of encryption. We don't care the tech stack. We don't care the tools you're using. We have to have this type of uptime. We have to have a tag so we can monitor costs. We have to have the time to delivery, done within 5 minutes once a week, so we can keep doing feature improvements. So defining more of the business requirements and business policies, and giving the individual development teams the freedom of choosing tools, of choosing the delivery methods, but making sure that they know and understand and meet those policies. This is what helps them scale to other teams. This is what helps them support innovation like AI at the same time, and so take advantage of some of the new tools and stuff that's coming out. At the same time, still meeting those business requirements of what DevOps is all about. So yeah, it's a fun topic and a balancing act of, I've worked with a lot of enterprise companies that will get as specific as this is the tool stat you're going to use across all engineering projects. And that just kills innovation because there's so much new technology comes out all the time. I am trying to, what I've seen in the industry now is, tools are somewhat immutable. Use them, throw them away. The CI/CD tools sometimes can be rebuilt frequently. If you're moving from an EC2 to containers, now to Lambda. And so depending on your tech stack, depending on the innovation and technology of the things that you're using in the cloud, don't be sold on the tool sets, be sold on the policies and the processes of getting things out there. And that's what you really have to focus on, allowing the teams to keep identifying new tool sets to use for the process. So I'm not sure if I answered that question directly, but that's what I've seen as like a bigger challenge as today is coming in and teams start to grow.
I think you hit it too. And one of the things we were talking about in the green room before the start of the roundtable is platform engineering. That's one of the things that's kind of evolved or happened either because of or in parallel with DevOps. I think you could argue that, initially we thought developers would do everything, security and platforms, and yeah, that isn't going to happen, right? They have other things they need to do. But the rise of platforms, not just platform engineering, but things that are better integrated, spending less time in the tools business yourself, trying to make everything work. That's definitely a trend, and I think something the cloud providers, AWS, are well positioned to address, Dean.
Yeah, go ahead, Ryan. You were going to say something.
I was just going to
jump out your chair, actually.
I know. I just remind companies over and over and over again that DevOps itself is not a differentiator from their other competitors to their business. DevOps is it's an internal thing that if it's done right, the customers aren't even aware of it, right? It's like the sound man in the back of the room. It's everything is done right, then customers aren't aware of it. Your business is moving forward. And so there are because it's like a undifferentiated heavy lifting of making sure that gets done, there are so many things that you don't have to reinvent the wheel for. You can adopt and move quickly on, but but the scope of what DevOps is different at every company. And so defining the scope and the policies in place, but the tools and processes, a lot of that can be the same from company to company, in my opinion, depending on the tech stack. And that's where I usually fight a lot of companies saying, stop building everything from scratch. It's not value to your business or to your customers or wherever your value is. It's like, find something that works out there and get it out there faster. So sorry, Dean, you're right. Go ahead.
No. I like the way that you phrased it too. It's more about the process and not so much about the tactical implementation of that process, right? That's pretty important because, we have our suite of tools that we use, like code deploy and things like that. There's different products on the market. There's things that you do. There's different, there's multiple different ways to be able to deliver the same type of outcome. But as long as you have the requirements up front, your functional, non-functional requirements, and they've been agreed upon, as long as the business practices have been put in place, you really don't care tactically how you implement those. And you kind of want to make that abstraction there because you want the flexibility to change those tools out. Now, I'm not saying go out and get rid of AWS and go to a compete cloud when I say that, but at the same time, there should be an abstraction to everything that you do when you run in a business, right? You want to be dependent on one specific system or platform. So it goes a long way to be able to build that platform engineering choice, where that platform engineering choice really is an abstraction to your endpoint. And that's really what you should be thinking about. Allow that platform choice to be able to provide that automation and that redundancy and standardization of execution on the back end. That's the tactical stuff. Let the platform do that stuff, but hold the process and your requirements close to your heart and what needs to be done from the business side.
It's an interesting way to look at this, but I've said before that there's one guaranteed version of vendor lock-in, and that's build it yourself, because you are the vendor. You're supporting whatever you built, and you're spending more and more dollars, time, resources on supporting that. Not saying you shouldn't ever do that, but it is a commitment. Maybe you open source it and it kind of goes down that path, but most people don't.
And it's even more of a commitment.
Yeah, exactly. So, I'm not saying don't ever do it, but it's not the nirvana. It sounds like, oh, you should just build that. Yeah.
Right.
There's a career choice for you right there. To that point. And to your point, you want to be able to leverage the latest innovations, right? Maybe I do want to bring something into my AWS environment and use that, or AWS comes up with a new product or offering, or Platformr does. You want some flexibility, and part of that abstraction is APIs and integrations and things that help you not become the programmer to make it all work, if you will.
Yep.
Sysadmin. Go ahead. You were going to say something?
Yeah, well, we had a question, I think, that came up about asking for AI specifically on DevOps. I think that's a really good question. And I can jump in and kind of give my experience and thoughts on this. So, AI, I'd say the AI tooling, the AI results are still fairly new, just like the rest of AI in the industries. And so it's getting traction. But what I've seen it really successful for is there are so many things that will now help you, like using AI to actually build out your CI/CD pipelines. One of the biggest bottlenecks I've seen is like, if sometimes I worked with one company. They had 4 engineering teams and they had 1 DevOps engineer. And that DevOps engineer was fairly junior. And whenever that company wanted to either create a new product or create a branch or whatever that was adding more tasks to that DevOps engineer, he was always that bottleneck. And so what AI now is doing for people like that in that scenario is it's a velocity increaser. So now he doesn't have to sit there and write out a bunch of manual CI/CD tasks and configure tools. Like GitHub has a really good MCP server. If you're familiar with that, that'll help you write out your GitHub actions, and that'll deploy out your code based on your tech stack, based on the target of your tech stack and where it's being hosted. There's AI is doing really good on helping you build out your CI/CD quicker. And at Platformr, we actually use AI to build over 80% of our unit tests and smoke tests. So it gives us better coverage on the testing capabilities. We also, of course, use it then to do a lot of our coding. And what we do with our AI is we actually feed in some of our requirements. So we feed in the fact that we need to be GDPR compliant over here. So make sure that when we look at, and so it helps us do some compliance enforcement as well and do some discovery on that. And then I'd say that for the last thing for AI, after the fact, once we deploy things out, it is more aware of the correlations between the different dependencies of our software applications, that it now helps out our monitoring team better with the troubleshooting and debugging. And so I consider all of that as part of this DevOps world of making sure software is successful in production. But that's where I'm immediately seeing the benefits. It's basically helping do a velocity increaser across the board on the topics. So Dean, I don't know what about you think on that?
Yeah, so AI and agentic AI, right, is really what's taken off. Agentic AI is really taking off right now. As you probably heard, Amazon Q Developer is a big part of our approach to how we're providing that type of AI assistance. And the agentic piece is that when you're writing specifically to code for Java or .NET or something like that, we'll have agentic context to be able to help with that writing of that code. And going back to security and compliancy too, you want your developer to be writing code in a secure way from the beginning. That doesn't have to go through a QA type process. Remember those times where the developer used to write their code and give it to a senior developer who then do the QC check of it, quality control check of it, and then it would go to the person down the line type of thing. Well, we want that code to be written the right way the first time, using the code samples in the agentic AI backend, which of course is customizable by whatever your business processes are, right, and what your standards are, and then have those workflows built into your developer experience. Those workflows automatically kick off that sequence of events that are a necessity for your business.
I knew you'd both have an opinion about it.
There's a tool here. Check this out. I'll post this in the chat. This is a GitHub repository from AWS on guard rules registry. It's a really good list of guard rules around your CI/CD pipeline, around your DevOps environments that you can copy, reuse, and kind of grow from there. It's getting some. I know the future of it is getting some of the Amazon Q stuff embedded in it as well. So it's going to start growing that way too. But it's what we use here at my team. So.
One thing I'd say, and I spend a lot of time looking at how AI is impacting the software development lifecycle, we see a lot of things happening on the development, code gen, developer tasks. That's probably where the quickest innovation is happening. That doesn't mean it isn't happening elsewhere in the software development lifecycle. As I think about it, as AI kind of moves from an individual productivity enhancer, if you will, doing automations for you, the people who are doing DevOps engineering, platform engineering, SRE, those are the people who have the multiplying factor. When you improve their productivity, you improve productivity of multiple people.
Yeah.
So my advice to folks on AI is AI going to take your job? No, it's going to change your job, but you're going to be expected to do a lot more because you can leverage AI. So you have to be able to leverage. So lean into using AI and figuring out how it can help you, how it works, et cetera. And there'll be some challenges too to learning new things. That's always good.
Let it write your documentation for you, right?
Yeah. Well, hey, thank you very much.
Let it write your documentation, or
Oh my
or
God.
let it look at the application and actually make recommendations of how to make it better.
Have it analyze your test plan. Have it analyze your
exactly.
configurations, and make 10 recommendations to make it better. There's a lot of things you can use it for. It isn't just to automate tasks, though. That is increasingly a bigger agentic part of it, if you will. So good.
Once you get a flavor, a taste of these tool sets too, it's hard to live without them. I know internally we're using a lot of AI tools now for just to run our business, and I'm at a point I can't imagine how I used to do my job before we're provided all these tool sets. And it's the same way with the people that develop code that I know, the SAs. They're doing this type of work every single day. They don't know what they were doing before they had Q developer, just because it is becoming part of their normal practice now of leveraging it. And exactly what you said, Mitch. It's not eliminating jobs at all. What it's doing is it's creating more productivity for people to be able to get on even faster to the next exercise, or to alleviate some of that heavy lifting nobody wants to do anyway, like documentation and stuff like that, right? Test plans.
I think it accelerates the learning curve. I don't know Rust, and man, for me to take the time to learn it, to be able to how to set up a pipeline for it, okay, I can learn that really quickly with AI, right? Or learn what I need to know. If I want to go deeper, I always can. So, it may sound scary in some cases, but I think if folks lean into it and really realize how much it actually is a lot of fun, could be a real big help to you as well. All right. So I'd love to hear kind of any sort of insights that you can share about companies leveraging AWS and third-party tools, and some of the things that you do in Platformr. I mean, when I say services at AWS, that's a loaded statement because there's so many.
We have a
things.
Couple. So
I heard you have a catalog.
We can go down in alphabetical order if you want. How much time do we have? We can go through.
I don't think we'll get out of the A's, but
Yeah,
exactly. Maybe thinking about this, our theme is automation, right? And so how do we do more, through automation, whether it's AI or without AI? Where maybe one of some of the key areas, if you want to pick a few of that, Ryan, if you want to start, or Dean, whoever wants to kick in first. I know you've got plenty of examples.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Dean.
I'll just go really quick. So I think everybody wants to get to a point that they're, a company who has a streamlined process like Netflix or somebody like that, right? So always having different, deployments happening very quickly, a lot of quality that goes out, stuff like that. But, the Metas and the Netflixes, the GEs, the Coca-Colas and people like that. I mean, they set up requirements to their business application owners and said, this is what the business application owner set the requirements to the infrastructure team. Said, this is what I need to do to be successful for us to grow our revenue base. Here's what you need to do and put in place to be able to get these, updates out the door. And that also includes the financial sectors, manufacturing. I think about the retail environments where you have distributed point of sale devices and things like that. I mean, that's when you really think about, okay, I'm not talking about just a small handful of applications in a single location, say just in a single region with AWS. We're talking about a global distribution. There's no way you're going to do this without having the right processes and the people and the tool sets to be able to do something like that. And that's really where we start seeing at scale with our SaaS and our different ISV customers. We're seeing that a lot with our software development customers that we have in manufacturings and retails and things like that. I mean, it's becoming table stakes. They have to do it. Now, where they're growing is when they're looking at the entire enterprise and different types of application spaces, their workloads, where they can have a single view or a collaborative view on what their security posture looks like, what their infrastructure dependencies look like, what their performance, all those tracking to different types of alerts and thresholds and things like that. That's where they take the second step and get that more mature type of environment level. And Ryan, I'll let you go. I'll let you loose. Go ahead.
Yeah, no, and I can give you a few examples of what we do at Platformr, what I've seen other people doing well in the tool sets, and both in AWS and outside of AWS. But like what we're trying right now at Platformr, and it's getting pretty successful, is part of our development process is we write our user stories and our test plans, right? And that's somewhat of a manual process based on the product owners and what we're trying to do there. And what we're doing is we're feeding that into Q. We are asking Q to write like Postman API unit tests. We're also asking Q to create a CloudWatch synthetics, like a Puppeteer script where we can do smoke tests. So that's how we're creating more than 80% of our testing coverage right now, is having AWS, having AI do a lot of that for us. Sometimes it's good, sometimes we have to train it more, but it gets us mostly the way there. And so that's some of the tools that we've been using. That we've really been benefiting on. Of course, I'll do my shameless sales pitch here at this time, because Platformr is a tool that is focusing on DevOps. And so I've been passionate about DevOps. My co-founder has been passionate about DevOps. And so this was one of the things that we wanted to build was we see it as a somewhat undifferentiated heavy lifting in that DevOps space. And so we're like, well, using a tool to provide better policy guidance, policy enforcement, but giving the freedom of innovative CI/CD pipelines and tech stack is what I think most companies need out there. And so, I mean, at Platformr, that's what we focus on is, everything from the top, whether you're a startup company or enterprise company, it's getting that company-wide governance policies in place, whether it's security, whether it's financials, whether it's reliability, whether it's your product team saying it's time to market, all of those type of requirements, getting that in place. And so then you can quickly spin up environments, quickly deploy out your code, have the observability, the understanding of the health of how that went, and being able to start tracking that and improving on that. So of course, this is where Platformr comes in, where we try to focus on and trying to do that balance of enforcing policies and governance at the same time supporting innovation at the workload level, the tool set level. So that's a lot of what we do. There's another open source project that AWS has. And this is what we try to find a lot of these open source projects that AWS provides. Every one of the little teams has a lot of times their open source projects, but we do we support a lot of SaaS companies out there. And the SaaS factory team at AWS has a tool called the SaaS Builder Toolkit. And it basically does all the scaffolding for you and really helps you get going fast on creating like a control plane on managing a multi-tenant SaaS environment. And, using something like that, throwing it into like Kubernetes or EKS, and it gives you like best practices day one, where instead of reinventing the wheel, instead of learning and managing that technical debt, leaning on people like this that are investing in a lot of those universal solutions across companies is where we try to focus on and trying to help out other companies with. So that's, and then I literally sit down and do Google searches probably once a month on new DevOps tools. And of course, right now they're all being AI focused and different perspectives and uses of them. And that's a current challenge I know a lot of companies is how to prioritize R&D versus productivity. And there's always that balance in figuring out how much can I invest in R&D and experimentation and how that's going to impact my current productivity and velocity. And I always try to say, you gotta find your company's balance on that, so then you can keep that iterating process of improvement.
Yeah, tools and patterns. So the way we look at it too, we're always providing, as you're finding our open source frameworks, we also provide a lot of code snippets, and that's in CloudFormation and Terraform, right? So we know that not everybody's using CloudFormation scripts all the time. So we try to provide both in parity. One may come out first, but we try to do parity with Terraform and CloudFormation. But we offer a ton of different types of we call blueprint code snippets that you can find out on AWS. And if you can't find them on AWS, feel free to ping me on those. But, we're always trying to provide acceleration to our customers, knowing that you don't have to create the wheel over again. If you're thinking about it, somebody's also thinking about it. And if we don't have something, we have a lot of specialist people on our team that would love to take on that challenge.
Oh, I think
there's a question will divide our audience, which is best, Terraform or CloudFormation. I don't think we have enough time for this call right now to go down that
road. We're going to throw that one in. That's the mosh pit. We'll put that over there in the mosh.
That's a tough one.
I have a question for you.
I always say the answer to that question, because I get that question all the time, is it really depends on your team and your tool stack. It's part of the tech solutions. It's not part of the policies and the process. It'll influence part of the process sometimes, but if you have a team of a lot of developers, a lot of times they'll lean towards CDK because it's more developer friendly and easier to learn. But if you're multi-cloud and you have to be multi-cloud, so there's a different answer for every company out there. I get that question quite often, like, what's the universal answer? What's the easy button? I'm like, there's not one. You got to pick what's right for your team.
Yeah, there's no easy button anyway, right? Yeah,
not an easy button. Hey, I'm wondering if you could connect the dots for me a little bit more of how does Amazon Q developer, how does Platformr connect together? What's the connection between the two? How does either the workflow between the two or the processes? They aren't two standalone, completely do two different things, don't ever touch each other. Talk about how they work together.
Sure. So we use Visual Studio Code for our IDE, for our development environment, and Amazon Q has a natural integration to that. So we can sit there and ask it to currently look at, do auto suggest on our code that we're trying to write snippets of our code to look at. There's also the Amazon Q CLI, which we use a lot as well. And that actually has a direct connection to our development environment. It knows the tech stack we're using. It knows kind of our environment. It knows a lot of how AWS infrastructure is set up. And we're also, separately Amazon Q, we're also creating our own MPC, like agentic solution that's really having a knowledge base of our best practices, our code snippets, our design pattern, things like that, where we're asking it questions on, so with Amazon Q, we're asking it to create like a Postman file for this function that's going to be deployed out into Lambda and hitting this API gateway. So that's a lot of how our integration works. We are also using, once we have, that's in the development environment. Once we push up something to a testing environment, that's where it goes through and we automatically create those CloudWatch synthetics canaries. We go ahead and use those Postmans to automate the testing of that and give us results to that. But that's a lot of how we're using right now. So just this is the stats that we have right now is Amazon Q is writing about 70% of our code. So we still need developers. It's not replacing anybody's job, but it's definitely a velocity increaser. And as it's replacing about 80% or more of our QA coverage. So
interesting. Anything you want to add, Dean?
Yeah. So remember, Q is a product suite name. So when people say Amazon Q, there's different products that fall underneath that. So Amazon Q Business is doing a lot of things too. We have customers who are coming to us asking, how can we create an end-to-end workflow, integrating the whole Q family, a suite of tools inside to be able to provide, the entry point of onboarding developers, making sure they have the right permissions, making sure they have the right infrastructure permissions, all the way through making sure they have the right tool sets based upon what their profile looks like and things like that too. So there's a lot of, the space is so new. There's a lot of people, a lot of great ideas that they're creating these net new landscapes.
Excellent. We have about 12-ish minutes left here. Maybe we put on our crystal ball hats, if there's such a thing, or thinking caps, and look forward. A lot of the thinking around how software engineers might work is moving to more orchestration, managing agents that are performing a lot of the work as opposed to spending as much time in code in a code editor. Doing design, communication skills around creating prompts and directing work. We're not there yet, but a lot of those things are happening. Parts of it are happening in the software side of it. How about it in your part of that, part of the software development lifecycle? You see similar kind of evolution of the roles of someone in test, someone in governance, someone in platform engineering, or do you think there'll be other different kind of specializations of where this is going? The good news is we're all predicting the future, which means we'll never be right or we'll never be
exactly
wrong. We'll just change our prediction, so it'll be fine. Don't worry. Dean, do you want to kind of give us your thoughts on where we're heading with all this?
I think the personas that are been built today with different types of roles within the DevOps paradigm are all going to be skewed. I think it's going to be more or less that everybody's going to be their own individual contributor, and the views that were once restricted to certain people in certain roles within the company, or are going to be open to everyone? Because I think a lot of the background work that's going to happen is going to be more automated to policies and based on AI triggers, where there's going to be, these folks are going to be more generalists, and they're going to be able to have a responsibility, right? We're increasing productivity with AI, have more responsibility over the entire environment that they control. That environment could be an infrastructure environment, it could be an application environment, it could be a lot of things, but they'll have more control over that, and they'll have these agents working on behalf of them and feeding them the information to make human type intelligent decisions rather than what's already been pre-scripted.
I 100% agree with Dean on that. I talked to a lot of universities and high schools about what software development will look like in the future. That's the first thing I talk about is you can't go sit in a closet and just bang out code. You have to have a general awareness of business requirements, of security best practices, of performance best practices, of reliability, and how that affects the business. And so it's the general evolution of software development at large is, we're starting off with assembly language where you have to be an expert at everything from memory management to processing, and we keep abstracting the actual coding as we going up. And I think that next evolution is a gigantic leap to more abstraction of the actual code, as now we're starting to write a lot of our code with prompt engineering and having a lot of that AI do a lot of that work. And so but they have to understand the best practices of what's required for the business. And that's more of the knowledge that they're going to go from there. They're going to need to know the software design patterns. They need to know a lot of like the traffic patterns and how things are working, how they're going to scale. But so much of that infrastructure, cloud providers out there like AWS providing so many solutions out there that are now pay as you go and on demand at our fingertips. It's really now, the speed of delivering features and products are just so much faster now, but they have to meet those business requirements still. So those software developers are just coming out of college, coming out of university. They have to have their minors in business as well to understand how business works and what's important to a business. So I 100% agree with Dean on that.
I think too, also the problem solving, the design, creative skills, some of those things that we use, whether you're designing a test plan or you're figuring out an architectural question. By the way, prompts are code too. They're just another form of code. And you're working at a higher level of abstraction. Gee, that sounds familiar. We've done that before, right? This one happens to be a pretty powerful one too. But, I think there's a lot of things that transfer. We're just working at a different level of abstraction, maybe at a different quantity or pace of productivity of what we can do, which is, I think, perfectly suited for working on the platform, the pipelines, the workflow, deployment into production, not just code generation. And by the way, you don't need to be a developer to write code then as part of your job too, right? That also is a big plus, I think, of it. Your thoughts on that, reactions?
Well, I 100% agree on that. Like I told you, I've been doing software development for 30 years, but I'd say over the last 6 years, not as much, right? As I move into like CEO roles. But now I can say I'm a developer again because AI writes it for me. So that's great.
Exactly. Yeah. Common language input. I mean, it's all going to come down to you tell me what you want built, and it's going to return at least give you the starting point of what you're asking for.
Excellent.
So one of the tests that I do when I'm interning or when I'm interviewing candidates or when I'm mentoring interns is, I can give you a business problem and you can solve it in code, but literally there's at least 100 different ways to solve it. So why did AI solve it this way, or why did you solve it this way, and it's better than the other ones? And I think that's the question that developers keep having to ask each other, and they don't know that what's the right way to solve a problem until they understand the bigger picture of success. So,
excellent. Well, we're coming up towards the end. Just to kind of give you both a heads up, we'd like you to think about a parting thought. We talked about a lot of things, so it's tough to encapsulate it all in one thought. But if there's something you want to leave with our participants, and thanks so much, everybody, for contributing your thoughts and ideas. To give you a little bit of space to think about that, I'll throw one out. Maybe it sounds whimsical, but I think is actually maybe not too far from the truth. I was asked yesterday, what's the IDE of the future look like with AI? And I said, I both hope it's this way, but I think it might be something kind of like this. I think the interface is going to look more like StarCraft than it's going to look like a code editor. Resource management, right? Strategy, mean, that's really what you're doing. It's kind of directing and creatively orchestrating that kind of work, whether you're doing, platform security or code or whatever it might be. But plus, I love to play StarCraft too, so that's a little bias, big bias on my part. But anyway, so I'd say that in a little bit of jest, but I really do hope that's something like that. Parting thought, Ryan?
My parting thought is, depending on the maturity of the people listening to us and their DevOps journey, I would just make sure that you understand that measuring the success of DevOps is a crawl, walk, run experience. And identifying the scope is number one. What makes your software being successful in production environment? And looking at the scope of security requirements, time to market requirements, looking at reliability requirements, your cost financial requirements, looking at all of that and scoping it all out and making sure that everybody on your team, like that's where you start. And then as you mature, you start introducing more automation, getting more detailed in the process. You start trusting those junior developers that just came onto your team to know what the measure of success is from the DevOps culture. And so that would be my leaving summary, is that make sure that you understand DevOps is the culture, and that step one is making sure that people are aware of what the requirements are, the scope are, and then improving the processes, improving the tools, and then Mitch, I think you said it well. Is like the tools are going to be ever evolving. Whether I just sit down and tell Alexa right now to write me a mobile app and then I go validate it, and that's my IDE. But that would be my leaving thought on that. And me and my team are here to help you on the journey. This is what we're passionate about, and this is what we can do to support companies. So it's, if there's anybody on the call here that is interested in talking more and needing help, we're here to listen. So go ahead, Dean.
I'll give you the common AWS response, right? We have some leadership principles that we live by, and one of them is think big. So think big, think about what you want that North Star to be, put a plan against it, and don't hold back. Nowadays, basically everything is possible. If you have money, people, right? There's tools out there, right? Money, people, and time type of thing. But build that North Star, think big, and start building out that plan. And we're all here to help.
Well, fantastic. Thanks to both of you, Ryan and Dean, for an engaging conversation. Thanks to Jennifer, Danielle, everybody, Jared on the back end who helped put this together, made us look good, getting us up in front of all of you. So we appreciate everybody on here at the teams at AWS and Platformr and TechStrong and Futura for bringing this to you today. We hope you enjoyed this conversation. There is a survey. It'll be in the email that we'll send you with a link to the recording. We'd love your feedback on how the conversation was today, what you found helpful, what we can do better, all those great things. So please check out Platformr, check out AWS, some of the tools and technologies, but even also the other resources we talked about, some of the open source tools and documentation that would be helpful. So thanks again to Platformr and AWS. On behalf of Ryan, Dean, and myself, this is Mitch Ashley signing off. Have a great day. Thanks for joining us, everybody.
Thank you.
Bye. Thanks, everybody.